Tarboro tosses their data centers. Broadcom is powering OpenAI now. Microsoft is making more deals. Lapsus scatters. A rolling stone summarizes no moss. Claude is a criminal. And we're going to take a look at all of the big AI cloud news of the week in this episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone. It is time for the Tech Field Day Rundown. I am your host, Tom Hollingsworth, and I'm on location this week. But joining me, as always, is Al. And Al, I have a question for you. How do you feel about deep fried club sandwiches with a side of sweet jam?
I'm sorry, it's going to take me a moment or three to process that. Not something I've really come across. Deep fried Mars bars in England is the nearest thing I've come across.
Well, luckily for you, it is Monte Cristo Day, which is not just a novel by Alexander Dumas, but in fact is probably one of the most decadent sandwiches you're ever going to eat. But if you feel somewhat ill after that, don't worry because it's World Patient Safety Day, along with a whole other host of things. But what we are definitely making sure we're taking care of this week is the news, because we are thrilled to have a lot of interesting things going on, and we are going to be bringing you all of that news as we go forward. Now, there's been a lot of news about data centers being built recently, but if you head over to North Carolina, an interesting development has happened because Tarboro's town council voted 6-1 to reject a $6.4 billion data center that was proposed by Energy Storage Solution. The reason? Resource and community concerns. Although you will be shocked to learn that the company is going to be challenging that decision in court. The ruling, based on legal criteria rather than public opinion, reflects broader tensions in North Carolina over rapid AI driven data center growth and its impact on local communities and utilities. Al, do you think that this tenant is going to be able to overcome City Hall?
Well, I think there's a couple of fun things in here. So, Energy Storage Solutions, who are going to build this apparently 52-acre facility for $6.4 billion. They're even a North Carolina company, so it's not like big business coming in from out of state trying to ruin our local city of Tarboro. And the concerns are the usual concerns about having a big data center built next to you. Noise, water consumption, because the data center was going to use a huge amount of water for cooling, and then also the cost and cost of power. The proposal itself was primarily that the power generation was going to be on site, and so there shouldn't have been a grid impact or cost of power consumption impact. But the locals were a little concerned around that, as often happens when these big data center projects are turning up. This particular one was interesting because the area was already zoned for heavy industrial, so it didn't require a council decision to allow heavy use of what maybe was previously farmland. This was already zoned for heavy industrial. And that rezoning process is what you normally see in a council, of very open meetings and lots of submissions from the community. The interesting thing for this one is that they had a special use permit application where the council, instead of taking public consultation, looks more at the science of what's going to go on than the public feeling. And that caused a little bit of a challenge in here. And that's the opening that ESS has to challenge this. The mayor even recused himself because he didn't feel he would be able to be independent in the decisions. And that's definitely an opening for ESS to say the whole council couldn't be independent and they were swayed by public opinion, which isn't supposed to matter in the special use permits. This is a weird one. Um, but it does carry on with themes that we see around concerns for power costs, water consumption, and in these communities where these massive AI data centers are being built out. It won't be the last time that we see it. I think there'll be some changes to how councils operate as a result of these challenges. So, in particular, the special use permit processes are going to need to be tightened up and made much more judicial looking rather than consultative looking, in order for these things to have the rulings here. And it was an overwhelming, it was a 6-1 ruling here. This overwhelming ruling to actually stand up to further review, they need to be more judicial in their processes there. Uh, we're going to continue to see more of these big data centers being built, and they'll be built in places where power is abundant or can be developed, and where cooling is either latent, inherent in the geography, or is something that can be managed easily. Of course, North Carolina, pretty high humidity and pretty warm at times, and those aren't good things for free air and low-cost cooling. So I can imagine the concerns from the locals. OpenAI plans to launch its own AI chip next year, co designed with Broadcom, to meet the soaring demands for computing power and also to mitigate that single source supply chain issue from Nvidia that plagues many of the AI companies. Chip will be used internally to run and train AI models, following the same sorts of trends we've seen from some of the other hyperscale vendors, Google, Amazon, Meta. Broadcom confirmed a major new customer with $10 billion of orders. Broadcom didn't say that it was OpenAI, but that's what we all believe. Move comes as OpenAI tries to bring in more resources to compete with products like ChatGPT, and particularly GPT-5 that's coming. Uh, we're seeing huge growth in AI data centers. Tom, does this mean huge growth for Broadcom as well?
It should. And I think this is an area that Broadcom has been particularly worried about. Because when you look at where all the growth has been happening in the industry, it has been happening around these AI accelerators. And Broadcom powers a lot of the AI infrastructure that's going in on the back end, but not the actual GPUs themselves. And I think that that's something that they really want to be a part of. Plus, they haven't exactly been on the best of terms with NVIDIA over the years. I remember there was a kerfuffle that involved Mellanox and Cumulus Linux and Broadcom API access. That happened I say many, a few years ago. But realistically speaking, Broadcom is giving OpenAI something that they couldn't get from NVIDIA. Essentially, they're getting custom silicon. Now, that's not exactly the way that this is being portrayed, but hear me out. NVIDIA is going to make NVIDIA silicon and you're going to run your stuff on NVIDIA, right? But so is everybody else. And that's part of the problem is that if you can optimize your models to run on NVIDIA silicon a little bit better than everybody else's, then you have an obvious advantage. It's one of the things that we've seen from some of the AI platforms that shoot to the top of the app store for a little while. Was it DeepSeek? I think was one. They just figured out how to run a little bit faster. So, what's OpenAI to do? Because if they're trying to optimize their code to run on the same thing that everybody else is using, there may not be a way to win. Well, what if the manufacturer was optimizing their hardware to take advantage of the way that you do things, but in a way that makes it so that not everybody has that same chance? Now, I'm not saying that there's any kind of a deal here that Broadcom is giving OpenAI to make them kind of dominant in that space. I'm just saying that when you look at the handwriting on this wall, Broadcom really wants OpenAI to be one of their biggest customers when it comes to purchases, right? And the only way to really make that happen is to play ball with them, to give them something they can't get from NVIDIA, which is a little bit more insight into the design process. So I think what we're probably going to see is, a large purchase. What was the number $10 billion in order? That's pocket change anymore. What it is, though, is an opportunity for OpenAI to really kind of innovate around these new chips and possibly get people chasing those performance gains. And how do you do that? Well, if you're writing your software to take advantage of what OpenAI offers, why not go buy the hardware from the same group? I'll have to see what happens with this one. Speaking of OpenAI, they and Microsoft have signed a new non binding agreement that's going to allow OpenAI to restructure itself into a for profit company and potentially go public down the road. That means that Microsoft gets to secure continued access to their AI technology. OpenAI's nonprofit parent would, of course, retain oversight and a $100 billion equity stake. Pocket change. There are some regulatory hurdles. And of course, there's that lawsuit from somebody that owns a social media platform that complicates the process. The move supports OpenAI's growth plans, partnerships with cloud providers, and long term revenue goals. But of course, the other elephant in the room is that OpenAI is continuing to project losses all the way through 2029. The agreement comes amid rising tension between OpenAI and Microsoft as both pursue competing AI initiatives. Alistair, do you think that this non binding agreement is going to give OpenAI the flexibility that it needs to really start making money?
Yeah, is making money really the point? We're transforming society and building a better world for the future. No, I can't do it. Yeah, profitability has got to be somewhere in the path along the way here for OpenAI. There's an awful lot of money has been invested, and the investors are going to want their money back sometime. Currently, OpenAI is valued at $500 billion, $500 billion, and that's an awfully high valuation for a company that is supposedly not for profit. The transition across from being not-for-profit Restructure to having a for-profit part and maybe retaining a not-for-profit, that's going to be the complex bit, and that's the bit that is under a little bit of attack in the courts with Mr. Musk suing along with XAI, his his AI company, suing OpenAI around this move from its original non-profit agenda. There's a lot of money at stake, and so, of course, it goes to the courts. OpenAI does need to focus on, at some point, becoming profitable, unless they're going to stay true to their non-profit roots. I mean, they've been non-profit so far, but that's not in a good way. And yes, there's a whole lot of stories, and we'll cover this a little bit later, around the longer or medium-term plans for all of these AI vendors and AI platforms from Microsoft all the way through. Uh, Definitely sort of commitments to multiple vendors. And again, we've seen this in the other stories. Having OpenAI not just dependent on Microsoft, but having also just done a big deal with Oracle to put a whole bunch of workloads, $300 billion worth of workloads into Oracle's cloud over time. I think OpenAI doesn't want to be stuck to just one partner with Microsoft, particularly when they're looking to do very big deals and be reducing their risk from single supplier. That again is a theme we're seeing in the AI infrastructure world, is recognizing some risks around Nvidia and other single source suppliers. The recently formed Scattered Lapsus Hunters, a merger of Scattered Spider, Lapsus, and Shiny Hunters, announced that they're disbanding after they managed to compromise Jaguar Land Rover. Apparently, these attackers, these hackers, have decided that they'd like to enjoy their ill-got gains, and they're going to retire. But really, we think what's going to be retired is the brand Scattered Lapsus Hunters, and that in fact these people who are skimming money around are going to want to continue to do that. Probably there's somebody at the top who financed it, who's pulling all of the money out, and the people doing the real work, who are only getting pennies on the dollar, are probably going to continue to want to do that real work and continue to attack various companies along the way. Uh, Tom, do you think the solution to this is for the attackers themselves, the people who do the real work, to be getting a larger proportion of the money? Do we need to renegotiate contracts in this malware business?
Are you saying that the criminals need to unionize? I mean, it's not the craziest idea that I've heard. Now, I think what you're seeing here is the results of Icarus flying too close to the sun. Again, because this isn't even the first time we've seen this out of either of any of these component groups, right? They, when they came together, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, maybe you're combining resources for something." And I'll admit, hacking Land Rover was not a bad hit, but this is like that scene at the end of Ocean's 11 when they all kind of walk away and pretend like they don't know each other, but they're not going to stop being criminals. Like this ultimately comes back to they need to let the heat die down for a little bit until people kind of forget about them. Some other nation state backed team or some other group does something, and then we'll hear about them again, probably 6 or 7 months when we least expect it. Uh, Especially the Lapsus group, they kind of thrive on this notoriety. They want people to know who they are. It's not about the money for them. Don't get me wrong. If I had millions of dollars just sitting around that I'd purloined from things, I would probably be spending it on random stuff too. But it's more about everybody knowing their name, knowing who they are, knowing that they were behind it, right? It's the credibility thing. It's like tagging a website back in the 90s. So I wouldn't put too much stock into this retirement. It's like a professional wrestling retirement. Give it a month and I'm sure they'll be back at it. before you know it. Penske Media Corporation, which is the company that owns Rolling Stone, Variety, and Billboard, has sued Google. And why would they be doing that? Well, they're accusing it of illegally using its content to train AI models and power Google's AI overviews in search. Penske argues that Google is abusing its monopoly by forcing publishers into a deal that they didn't agree to, while Google claims that the feature helps users and drives more traffic to publishers. The case marks one of the very first major lawsuits by a media company against Google over AI, which is, of course, adding to fuel to the fire against growing copyright and antitrust challenges that the tech giant faces in US and Europe. Al, that was an awful lot for me to read. Can you give me a summary, but don't use Google for it?
Yeah, I might get you a natural intelligence or natural stupidity based answer to this. What's going on here is that Google is starting to use AI to generate articles that summarize what's being published elsewhere. So when you get a search result that points to maybe an article that's on Rolling Stone, Google will offer to summarize that for you rather than suggesting you go and read the original article that Penske Media Corporation paid to have somebody write, either with or without AI. And that's the core of it. That Penske Media says, yeah, we're perfectly happy for Google to go and crawl through all of our content and direct interested parties, interested users, to come and visit our site. But we put a line where you take that information you've gathered from our site and use it to generate what's essentially your own article on your own site. And therefore, we don't get that connection. Of course, Google says, yeah, you'll get the link coming through. People will just read the summary and then they'll want to go and read the real thing. TLDR, yeah, I'm going to read the summary if it's any good. If your summary is terrible, I'm probably not going to read the original article either because the summary has put me off the whole thing. So I can absolutely see the point for the media publishers here. People writing good content, as we know at Tech Field Day, is something that's really vital to us. Having good content that's been thought out and delivered by a human and is not just more of, well, maybe AI slop, is a really important part of communicating complex things and communicating particularly topics that our audience are interested in, highly detailed topics that maybe the AI can't quite catch up with. So I absolutely can see the point here for the owners of Rolling Stone, the various other platforms that they publish. And I think we will continue to see more of this. So there's a generic issue at the moment that there's a huge amount of AI generated content that is now being scraped from the web and used to train future generations of AI. And just like the chicken flu issues that they had in the UK, where they were using ground up pieces of chicken to feed to the chickens and closing a loop of infection, we may well find that we're closing a loop of infection here. And the more we can do to get human generated content and human generated insight into that loop, the better our lives are going to be and the better our AIs are going to be in the future. Over the summer, it's just ending winter here, but it's the northern summer, cybercriminals exploited Anthropic's Claude AI to automate large-scale data center extortion. If you can automate doing good things with AI, you can automate doing bad things. This included reconnaissance and credential theft, ransomware, and they targeted the usual sorts of larger organizations that are kind of critical: healthcare, government, also religious organizations. Uh, that sent demands exceeding $500,000, and Anthropic's report detailed how Claude enabled North Korean IT worker scams and the creation of advanced ransomware, which lowered the technical barrier for criminals. This is the new ground for script kiddies, is AI script kiddies. The company responded by banning accounts, improving detection tools, and shared threat indicators with authorities, warning that AI-assisted cybercrime is evolving rapidly and likely to be much more common because it's so easy. Tom, have you built any ransomware recently by vibe coding?
For legal reasons, no. For anecdotal reasons, hold on, let me go ask Claude, because it seems to be that Claude wants to aid and abet everybody out there. This is one of the problems that we run into when you create a model that really just wants to help people, right? And doesn't know how to not answer certain questions. Like if I asked it to build an explosive device, oh no, I can't do that. Would you describe how an explosive device works theoretically for research purposes? Oh, sure, no problem. It's that old trick of, I won't do the thing that I was explicitly told not to, but I will leave lots of hints to help you figure this out. And let's be fair, jailbreaking these models and trying to figure out a way around their controls is almost half the game anymore. And one of the problems that you run into is if the AI is doing its job and consuming all of these things and reading all of the available information out there about crafting the perfect um, information campaign to get extortion out of people, then yeah, it's going to know what works and what doesn't, and it's going to tell you, oh yeah, this one didn't, this one worked, but that one didn't, and don't have them pay you like this, pay that, and oh, you're in North Korea, so you're going to have to use these systems. Like that's the deal. It's doing what it was designed to do, which is refining information into something and producing, well, in this case, a summary, but one that allows you to do nefarious things. And we're going to have to watch out for that. It's every problem that we've ever run into where someone gives somebody a little tidbit of information that they're not supposed to, and the next thing you know, they take it and run with it. And it now is happening at the speed of however many millions of GPUs are powering these clusters. So I applaud Anthropic for doing the right thing and going and banning a whole bunch of people's accounts and trying to tighten down controls and other stuff like that. But every time that you do that, you just create craftier criminals. We had a couple things we wanted to take a closer look at this week, and they involve the advances that are happening in the AI space, but also where it intersects with cloud and specifically hosted AI. The first one, of course, is a company that we've talked about previously on the rundown, and that's CoreWeave. It's a cloud provider which is backed by Nvidia, and they have a $6.3 billion order for AI computing capacity, with Nvidia agreeing to buy any unused supply through 2032. The deal highlights CoreWeave's reliance on Nvidia, who is its sole GPU supplier and investor, while boosting its role in powering AI workloads. Despite strong growth, that would be $1.21 billion in Q2 revenue, which is up 207% year over year, the company remains unprofitable, losing $290.5 million. Major contracts include an $11.9 billion deal with OpenAI, and that has fueled demand and pushed CoreWeave's market value above $58 billion. Now, Al, we've got a story we're also going to be talking about Microsoft, but I want to kind of get your thoughts on CoreWeave and the fact that they seem to be getting a lot of sales, but not making a lot of money, and they are almost entirely dependent upon NVIDIA to make that happen. Why would NVIDIA agree to buy all of their supply for the next 7 years?
Well, I think having long-term commitments for NVIDIA helps them deal with the risk that there is an AI bubble and that all of a sudden there may be excess GPUs in the market, the way there were when the cryptocurrency bubble went pop and we needed to find a new use for all of these GPUs. Of course, NVIDIA was lucky because along come generative AI and NVIDIA GPUs are vital. Having that continued long-term relationship, I think this is very much a trend we've seen in the last couple of months in the coverage we've had here on the rundown. We've talked about some of the deals around long-term electricity supply, building out new data centers, and long-term supply of new GPUs. Of course, you always want the newest GPUs because they give you more performance for consuming less power, and these kinds of deals are really vital for that continued supply. It should also mean that CoreWeave is even further at the front of the queue to get those new GPUs when they're first shipped, and meaning that CoreWeave can then sell more services to companies like OpenAI to run their infrastructure. So the general theme we're looking at in this closer look is around that long-term commitments between the various partners, but with a little overtone of how many of these partners are actually making money. Because we talked earlier, OpenAI is on a track to make money, well, not this year, not next year, not the year after. Hmm. CoreWeave may well be in the same place. Um, it becomes a concern, and well, I think we can see that Nvidia is the place that's making all of the money, and that $6.3 billion will buy back what you don't sell doesn't seem like a big risk for Nvidia with the massive profitability they've had from these GPUs. Of course, another element in here is the Nebius group, who are a US-based, Dutch-based NeoCloud is doing a deal with Microsoft with 19.4 billion. The Amsterdam-based company will provide AI computing power from a New Jersey data center through 2031, and again, using Nvidia chips. Microsoft, already working with CoreWeave as another investor, and the whole deal sort of fits together that Microsoft is using Nebius's cloud platform and Nvidia chips in here. Does it seem like it's going to be hard to differentiate yourself as a provider of these cloud platforms or these cloud AI platforms?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that because they're all running the same stuff on the back end, right? They're all running NVIDIA. And so why would Microsoft want to use this other platform and CoreWeave? Well, the only reason I can think of is they want, diversity. They want to make sure that a CoreWeave outage or CoreWeave acquisition doesn't cause problems for them. So and you're basically funding this company to do this build out, which of course puts you at the front of the line when you need to, increase capacity or something like that. So I don't think it's a bad move on Microsoft's part. I think that they're investing smartly if they've got some money in a lot of different pots as opposed to kind of tripling down on using one like CoreWeave. I don't think customers are going to care one way or the other because one of the things that we've seen over the years is this idea of multi-cloud, right? We're using things like cloud arbitrage to make it make sense financially, and I don't necessarily know that that's borne out over the years. I think people just like the idea of saying that if we need to, we can cut and run to Azure over AWS. And it's funny that AWS is kind of at the front of my thoughts there because there's another company that was unprofitable seemingly forever. Amazon couldn't make money to save its life until it started selling cloud computing. And then all of a sudden they were making money faster than they could figure out how to spend it. And I think that maybe that's the hope is that these companies, CoreWeave and Nebius, are effectively riding the wave right now of what's hot in the hopes that they can hold on long enough to either make it make money or find that thing that Amazon did that allowed them to start raking in the money as crazy as possible. I guess my next question is, can these companies hold out from being acquired long enough to make that happen?
Or do they need to hold out from being acquired? They need to be attractive to be acquired as an exit. But I think one of the things that we've been hearing a little bit is that this is still very much the early days of generative AI, and that the game will be played out over 5 or 10 years from now, not over 1 or 2 years. And often our horizon is much shorter. One of my delegates at our infrastructure field day last week was talking about it as being like when PCs were brand new and everybody was buying up PCs with no particular plan of how they were going to use them. And the predictions were that this PC bubble was going to burst and everybody be back on their mainframes for everything, or mini systems. Plays out, no, there's just, as you say, a little more innovation required before you get to the point we needed server systems to go with our desktops that suited the desktop's use case, and in particular client server computing became the thing that made desktops really valuable to us. I think that same idea of having some innovation, some more artwork is still required. And that's why we're seeing so much change in the AI infrastructure and the AI models and AI applications. This isn't done yet. This isn't even, it might be the end of the beginning, but it's definitely not even the middle, let alone the end here. So even though we talk up a little bit the feeling that this is a bit of a bubble, was if the actual natural growth of value being delivered catches up with the spend, that would stop this being a bubble and make it actually a simple growth. And I think that brings us to the end of the news of the week. But of course, there is more coming up in the following weeks. Say, I had AI Infrastructure Field Day last week in Santa Clara. And Tom, when you're finished in New York, you also have travel next week.
Yeah, you're right. I'm going to be right back out in Silicon Valley for Security Field Day. We have a wonderful lineup of companies, including new presenter SquareX and 1Password. And Alan Schimmel from Security Boulevard and TechStrong TV is going to be joining us as a delegate. Alan's opinionated when it comes to security. You want to know exactly how opinionated? Make sure you tune in. And then I'm going to be right back again about a week and a half later because we're going to be having a special exclusive event with Microsoft Security talking all about Microsoft Sentinel. That's going to be happening on October the 9th. I just got a look at the schedule. There's some really good conversations that are going to be going on. You can join some of my closest security friends from around the globe as we listen in, ask questions, and discuss all of the cool stuff going on. And then the end of October, right before all of the candy, you've got something sweet coming up, Al.
I do. I have that beautiful, tasty cloud field day returning. We have HPE, Fortinet, and Oxide Computing presenting, and a few more who'll be joining the roster as well to entertain and delight my delegates as well as you viewing. That'll be October 22nd and 23rd. And right after that, the following week is AI Field Day, where Stephen Fosker will be back in the Silicon Valley area, October 29th and 30th, with his own focus on what you can actually do with AI rather than the infrastructure, which was my focus. Uh, Keep up with all of these things on the Tech Field Day website, techfieldday.com. And of course, if you missed any of the past events, Tech Field Day YouTube channel is a great place to find all of the videos. Thanks for watching the Tech Field Day Rundown. You can find new episodes every Wednesday as a YouTube video or on your favorite podcast application. The Rundown is also streamed on TechStrong TV, and you can often catch up with us on other TechStrong or Futurum Group programs. We'll be back next Wednesday to talk about the IT news in the week that was. And until then, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, and for all of us here at Tech Field Day, we're wishing you and yours an absolutely beautiful day.